The UK's financial industry remains a boys' club despite years of pressure to hire more women and close the wage gap. That's according to disclosures by large institutions on the difference in compensation between male and female employees. The discrepancy is tied to the lack of women in senior management roles, and it's a problem that's only getting worse in several companies. Grace Lordan is an Associate Professor in Behavioural Science at the London School of Economics. She's also the founding director of the Inclusion Initiative. She tells us why there's much more room for progress in the fight for pay equality.
I think the overall picture is glacial progress. If I look at my own institution, I think the gender pay gap is around 23%. So that essentially means that I should probably take a day off on Thursday to try to average out equal hourly pay. But I think the worst of it all is in financial services. So it's the sector with the largest pay gap. I think the analysis that I've seen this morning of the 25 major banks that have reported, the gap is about 34%. It's larger if you include smaller players. And that's about a 1.35 percentage point decrease from 2019. Now, I will say that there's one bank, Crysdale Bank, who managed a 5 percentage point decrease, who's skewing that somewhat. So overall, my assessment in the financial sector and of the data of a whole is that, progress just has been glacial. We see these kind of small increases. I think we see a push from companies for us to focus on their median rather than their mean. And the reason that they do that is because we still have a disproportionate number of men in the highest paying jobs. So when you look at the mean, everything gets more dismal. But my assessment really is, things aren't going backwards, things aren't going forwards, that we're stuck. And I think that we're stuck because essentially we need culture change within organizations where we're not reliant on these compliance mechanisms like the gender gap reporting in order to bring change, but rather that there's a diversity mindset. And, the idea that women and men working together is good for business is really internalized. And then we'll see some erosion of the pay gap. If you look at kind of low pay sectors, so kind of services, we're seeing some improvements this year, which is kind of to be expected. There's been a bit of pay bargaining among the kind of major low wage employers in the UK that would have closed some of that gap. So it mightn't have been the companies, themselves. I think it would be kind of misleading to look at financial services and point to them as the worst person when it comes to gender. If we look at some of the other sectors that are doing a little bit better, some technology firms have done a little bit better, construction has done a little bit better, there's some big players in there, but they employ very, very few women. So it's easy to have a very narrow pay gap if you don't have a pipeline of women. Financial services is the one sector where the highest paying jobs in societies are. We have professional workers where it's hard to measure performance. So I'm not surprised that's where we're seeing the biggest gaps. it would be good to see more commitment devices coming through. From a personal perspective, I'd rather see a commitment to culture change. Every year I read the company annual reports, and companies do commit to diversity, particularly to gender in the UK. I think something like 70% of reports mention that they actually have initiatives to accelerate women within their organizations. And the fact that companies are telling us that and we're not seeing change really worries me. So what I would love for companies to be mandated to do is to actually audit the effectiveness of the interventions and the changes that they're making to bring women along, so we can actually know that they're doing things that are worthwhile, and we start seeing progress in the years forward. I feel quite pessimistic about the gender pay gap reporting. I think you might interview me again next year, and if we don't have some other mechanisms for change, we'll have glacial progress again.